Started with the stereotypes, right? We started with the stereotypes, which is very important, right? After auto wiring. So while using stereotypes, we understand that you need not to configure this bean class in XML file. You need not to register it basically. You need not to register. As a developer, you focus on writing class, but you don't configure that class in anywhere. You need not to configure it. When you write this class with the proper stereotype annotations, IOC will recognize them easily. IOC will recognize them easily and it will create objects. And as I said, right, it will give a special powers to each class. So if you mention with controller, it will understand that, okay, front end data need to map. If you configure with service, it will understand, okay, this maybe needs a transaction support, AOP support. If you annotate with the repository, it will understand that this DAO implementation I need to done. If you configure with configuration annotation, it will consider this class like a configuration class and it will give at the rate bean support. That is very important. Both are like together will work properly. Configuration with the bean. Okay. Hello, am I audible? Okay. Yeah. Fine. Yeah, yeah. Good. So I'll tell you. I'll tell you what is that at the rate bean. So while I'm writing classes here, right? While I'm writing classes here, controllers or service repositories configuration classes here. Sometimes I need to, as I'm completely avoiding XML file, right? I'm completely avoiding XML file. As I'm completely avoiding XML file beans configuration, if you want to create a bean, if you want to create a object, let's say here everywhere, these classes are for my application purpose only. My application purpose I am writing my classes. These are all my custom classes. There is some predefined class, that predefined class object I wanted to create. Earlier I used to have XML file, so I can go there and I may configure them. Now I am saying don't use XML file to configure your beans. So if there is no place to configure bean, where should I configure my bean classes? Apart from this MVC classes, whichever I am showing in this image, controller, service, repository, configuration, component. I want to create one connection object using a bean tag. Why paint responding very slow? Yeah. So yeah, these all are the beans only. These all are the beans only. Again, these all are beans only. But any specific bean, if you want to create, there we used to have bean tag apart from your MVC classes. So as we are avoiding completely that bean tags, via bean annotation, we do the same configuration. In simple words, whatever bean tag or however we are using bean tag in XML file, right? Same way you can use at the rate bean annotation also here. Okay. Custom objects or predefined objects, anything to create our objects and consider them like a at the rate, at the rate bean will be like your bean tag. See, during application writing, during application implementation, you need a controller. Okay, controller is having a special designation. I given at the rate controller annotation. You need a service, so service annotation given. You need a repository annotation given. You need a configuration class. Okay, we'll say about configuration class. You need a utility class. I have a component here. Now I need a connection object or connection pool object I wanted to create. I wanted to create a connection pool object now here. So where should I do that? If it is a XML file, I would be using bean ID connection pool reference, then connection pool class name, driver manager data source, something like that. I would have configured it. Now you are saying avoid it. You are saying avoid it. Where should I configure this? Exactly. Hmm. That's where I'm coming. So here I have this bean class. I mean driver manager data source. This driver manager data source is a predefined class, not mine. Somebody implemented and given to me. They didn't annotate it with any stereotype. They did not annotate it with any stereotype. Driver manager data source, let's say I am getting it from some connection pool provider. Apache implemented it. Okay. Consider Apache implemented it. Apache libraries from up. Yeah. Some other class in a jar file. Apache DBCP is having this Apache DBCP jar file. We can get it from Tomcat library or from Apache library or from Maven. You can get this jar file. So in this jar file, I have this class. I created all my classes here, whichever I can able to create. I created all my classes with controller service repository component. Some classes I need to procure from different libraries implemented by somebody. Okay. I need to create that objects as well. For that objects, they did not mention any stereotype because they implemented as a open source library for any framework suitable classes they created. Now this bean class object I wanted to create. How you will create? You need to configure that bean class inside configuration class with @bean annotation. For integrations. Yeah. Hmm. Correct. So you framed it well. Yeah. Yes. So as that classes are not annotated with the stereotypes, we are using @bean to create that object and to say IOC container. This is also our bean. Like how you are creating controller service component repository beans, please create the bean whichever annotated with @bean. Yeah, it's up to you. For your classes, already they given annotations, right? All the stereotypes are available for your classes. While you are writing, why you are missing to? You can do that. You can do that as well. But if you have stereotypes, why you are ignoring them? Use them. If you are really not able to use the stereotype, then yes. In that case, write a plain Java class and create that Java class object via @view. Okay. So this is a different concept actually. We will talk about it. So in our example, we understand here when I create all these classes, right? Config class I created with the configuration annotation. Here basically with the @bean, um, you know, um, combination we will use it. I'll tell you why that is. People usually who don't know exact. difference. They used to put it everywhere, but that is not the right way. So stereotypes we are using here for configuration class at the rate configuration, for repository class at the rate repository stereotype, and for employee service, yeah, at the rate service for service classes, for validation kind of stuff component, for controllers we used at the rate controller here. Okay, now usually we used to configure all that bean classes in XML file. Now we are not doing it, just via context colon component scan and via this base package attribute giving parent package reference. You can give up to com, inside com whatever number of child folders it have, it will go to all the child folders. Within child folder again, if it have another child folder, it will go to that package as well, and it will read all your classes whichever you created. It will read all your classes whichever classes are having this stereotype annotations. Only that classes objects it will create from that packages. Whichever classes are having the stereotype annotations, right? Only for that particular classes it will create object. Oh, your IOC. As soon as you load it into IOC container, right? This container, from this statement it will understand I need to scan it. What you need to scan it? This package. So what inside this package com.rb.ems, there are 4 packages: config, DAO, service, util, web. 5 packages. It will read all that 5 packages. Out of 5 packages we have 5 classes. So it will read all that 5 classes and it will create objects for them. So all objects are creating. Just it is doing component scan, scanning your packages and creating objects. Fine. Earlier I used to do dependency injection. So now coming to the flow, end user making a get call or post call. Consider end user came here and he is calling controller. He wants to call controller here. Post method or get method. He wanted to make a call here. So in this post method, whatever data end user sending, I am reading it. From here, I want to make a call to service. And from service, I want to make a call to repository. So I want to make call from one class to another class. How I can able to establish that communication? Earlier, dependency injection is in our hands. We could able to inject repository objects into service, service objects into controller via their ID references. If I go to auto wiring, earlier I was creating objects, so I used to do the dependency injection. Car is my controller. Here I am having engine reference and I was having setter method. So into that setter method, comfortably I injected here, right? This example. So here I injected here fuel object, or into car I injected engine object. Manually we did this. Now I don't have these beans, even beans and their ID references with me. How I can perform this dependency injection? Earlier fuel bean is available here, so that directly I injected into engine, and engine bean is available here, I injected into car. But now I don't have that references available with me. All these objects, fuel object or engine object or car object, everything created by container. Then how you can do the dependency injection? So that's where auto wiring annotation. Am I audible? Is it frozen? Oh, now, maybe. Okay, fine then. It's all due to this internet. Okay, let me switch my internet. Okay. I'm audible now, right? Okay. I'm audible now? Hello? Yeah. Do you guys able to hear me now? Okay. Let me reshare my screen. So I hope you can see my screen also, right? Yeah. 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 Now, as these objects are automatically creating by scanning, in case if you want to utilize that object in other class, service inside controller or repository inside service or component inside service or configuration if at all you required or at the rate bean. So how you will do the dependency injection of that classes? So for doing that, in case of automatic object creation, auto wiring also given. Auto object creation is done, right? So now container will take care of dependency injection also. So if you need the service object here, so just you can create your service class reference with the auto wired. Really my paint when it's become huge, unable to load it. Okay. So whenever I need the service object here via auto wire annotation, I can able to inject it. Auto wired I can use. What shall I do with this paint? Okay. So let me show you in example itself. So my controller class, employee controller class needs employee service class object. So what you can do if you need this service class object inside controller, you can auto wire it auto wired employee service. That's it. No setter, no property tag, no reference, nothing is required. Already object is available with container, right? Container will directly inject here. It will do dependency injection of employee service here. If your employee service requires a DO object here, just to mention auto wired, create employee DO. That's it. Your DO object also will be injected here. Hmm. Hmm. Correct. Hmm. Obviously. Single object. Same object. Everything. Correct. So though you hmm. Correct, correct. That's what, right? The singleton definition we discussed. So during singleton, only one object. Okay, okay. No, no. So I was saying, right, while referring containers, they will create only one object for your class. Okay, we will discuss that as well. But only one object will be created, whether through XML file or whether you do with annotations. Only one object throughout the application until you deploying to destroy your application. You started your production server today. Today it will create these 5 classes objects. Until you shut down, only 5 objects will be there in JVM. Though thousands of users request. Correct, correct, correct. Okay. So usually container will create singleton objects only. Container will create one object only during loading time. That is what I mentioned, right? So during loading time, singleton objects it will create. Either that can be at first user request or during loading time. So that object only will be there for entire life of that project. Okay, depth discussion if you guys need. Yeah, yeah. No, no, we will discuss definitely. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. One 15 or 20 minute session. I'll take maybe to get you people more idea on singleton or prototype in actual real time, right? Again, yeah, it's important thing only. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Later only. Not now. Later only. Okay. No, no. Sure, sure. No, what I am referring is in-depth discussion if at all required. In-depth discussion we will do it. Okay. Yeah. Maybe in workshop I'll add that. Okay. Next Saturday, or you can personally connect with me later session. Okay. Yeah. So here all these objects are creating that created objects earlier I used to inject via XML file. I used to inject them via XML file, either by using XML based auto wiring concept. Now I don't need to do that stuff. Objects are with IOC container. If you need, ask IOC container just by mentioning auto wired. It will inject it. While scanning your classes, right? To create objects, it will scan your classes obviously, right? During component scan, it will go to each package and scan your classes. So whenever it scan this controller class, okay, it will consider this like a controller. It will create object. Along with that, it will see did you mention any auto wiring here or not. If it see you mentioned auto wiring, again it will understand, okay, I need to create controller object. Apart from that, I need to inject service object also. For this controller, service object also required. So I need to create that service class object and inject here. So it will create service class object. Of course you need to mention at the rate service. Without mentioning at the rate service, it will not create object and auto wire it. Just it will ignore it. Okay. So as I mentioned at the rate service, for this employee service class, it will create this service class object and it will inject here. And when while it creating service class object, it will observe that DO object is required. So it will refer this DO class object and it will check whether you mentioned repository or not. It will create this DO object and it will inject into service class. So whatever you mention with AutoWired, automatically it will be injected to you. Automatically it will be injected to you. So see, I'll put some methods here. Yeah. So now you can see earlier order was changed. The most dependency one will be created first. So if you see, the most dependency one is employee is having dependency of service. Service is having dependency of DAO. So here DAO is the first one. DAO object need to be created and it should be passed into service. Service object need to be created and it need to be passed into controller. If you consider the order, see how it will perform. It can do it in any way. Sorry. Consider here I have one method public void post. Consider I have one post method here. So from this post method I wanted to call from here I want to call service class method. In service class I have some create method. So service class create method, and then DAO class consider I have one save method. DAO class save method. Now from controller to I wanted to call service class method. Let's do that here. Employee service dot create. You can call it because this object is available for you. Whenever you mention AutoWire, just imagine that this object will be coming to you. This object will be passed by your IOC container here. Now this create method wants to call DAO class save method. You can call DAO dot save. It will call DAO class save method. If you want to, yeah, actually we need to activate AutoWire annotation in case of XML based configuration, right? You need to activate all the annotations. So to activate all the annotations, we configure annotation config. In real time, you never use it, okay? If it is very old application, you may see them. But in Spring Boot, microservices concepts, even these tags, this XMLs also, they avoid it. Okay. So just to activate your annotations like auto wired, post construct, pre destroy, there are many annotations. To activate them, we will be using it. Otherwise, auto wire will not work. So to activate it, I used it. Now in my client class, I need object of controller. Get B. Generally, if it is a front end application, front end will call your controller. As I don't have front end, just calling my employee controller. So it will give you employee controller object. Once you get this object, I want to call post method. So I am calling post method. Post will call service class create method. Create will call DAO class save method. So that is the output end of the day we need to see. Call it and see the order also in which order it creates. See this. DAO created first, service created next, then controller created. Because DAO dependency I have in service, service dependency I have in controller. So most dependency one created first, then this dependency passed here and it created this object, then this dependency passed here by creating this object. So I called controller post called service create method called DAO save method. Okay. Yeah. Simple. This is what we are doing in daily life in Spring Boot. This much only, nothing much we are doing there. Yeah. Must right, otherwise how it will know? Definitely while immediately it will read all your classes and it will remember that structure obviously, right? So it will understand employee. Okay, it may prepare chart like this. It will prepare structure first before creating objects. Guys, for sure by Monday I'll change my laptop because it is having only 250 GB of C drive, not sufficient. Yeah. So controller object requires service object. Service object requires DO object. So it will create this structure. So then what it will do? The most dependency one it knows the first. So it will create this DO first, then it will create service next, then it will create controller. First it will create that structure, then In a reverse way, it will create objects and integrate them. And the most priority one for any application is the configuration. Correct? If you want to integrate with the other databases, or if you want to integrate with Kafka, that softwares need to be available, right, properly. Right? Our application may start, but configurations need to be created first. Connection objects or Kafka objects. That's why if you see, configuration object is creating first. At first step, it will execute all the configuration classes, because that is the most important one that should be created first. Inside configuration classes only DB connections, Kafka connections, right? Any connection related stuff, all that we code in configurations only. So as configuration is the most important one for the application, it will execute that class first. If configuration failed means, what is the need of creating other class objects? Nothing required, right? So immediately it will throw exception. Your application will not work because your configurations got failed. So it will give most important to the configurations first. Then based on the dependency order. Of course, DAOs only we inject into service, so DAOs will create first, then services. Then these services, along with the services, helper classes also kind of service helpers. So this helper objects will be created very next to the service. Then everything will be injected into controller. Controller will call. When end user call controller, and from controller, end user he may call service methods and DAO methods in the same order. Controller will call service, service will call DAO methods. Okay. Any questions? So this is the client class. As we are using standalone application, I'm trying to load it here and show you. If it is having a front end, right, even we don't bother about it. These three lines. Whenever from front end, right, whenever you hit URL, that URL will map to controller and it will execute. That we need to learn in MVC. Okay. We have still so many topics to reach till there. Okay. So yeah, remember it. As of now, we are using simple standalone main method. That's why I'm doing it. But once we go to web MVC, right, you don't need to bother about loading XML file into container and calling your controllers. Everything server will take care, or your container will take care. Advanced container, web application context we will be using here. That will take care of it. Okay. Via clear architecture, I'll explain there. Okay. So that it's easy to understand. Just imagine now, this is the front end, and from here I'm calling it. Yeah. I hope you guys getting right. So where we are now. That bean tag discussion we'll do. That I need a complete separate session. Configuration with the uh, yeah. So in case of XML approach, we used this by type by name for setter methods. For constructor, we used constructor, and we used auto detect. Okay. So now I no need to bother about setter or constructor. Setter methods are avoided. Constructors are avoided. Just auto void. Auto void will use by type only. By type mechanism only it will use. End of the day, what it is using means by type. Is it sufficient? Yes, of course, sufficient. And if you try to argue, can't I put setter method, can't I put constructor, you can put. No issues. But unnecessary. In controller, if you want to inject the same service with the setter method, you create it. On top of setter method, you can mention this @auto void. It will call the setter method. But it is unnecessary. Why you need a setter method? Without setter method also, if it is passing it. Okay. If you want setter method, on top of setter method, if you want to put auto varied also, you can put. Or if you want constructor which is parameterized on top of constructor, if you want to keep it, you can keep it. Hmm. Hmm. No, it will call. Container will do this. Whenever it will observe that you mentioned auto wired, it will take care of it. It will understand, okay, this man saying to me, call setter method of this controller class and inject it. It will do that job for you. You are not mentioning auto wired, na? See, you created different setter method for a different purpose. Public void my purpose setter method, something setter you created for some specific purpose. It is your method. It don't, it doesn't care about it because you didn't mention auto wired on top of setter method. When I mentioned auto wired, then the setter is auto wired setter method. When I mentioned auto wired on top of controller constructor, this is auto wired constructor. So I am saying why you need a setter method, why you need a constructor if you can able to automatically pass here. Maybe for few scenarios people will use this constructor based auto wiring only. Okay. Yeah, but don't complicate the topic. Don't complicate it. If you want to use it, use it. No issues. If somewhere you observe auto wired mentioned on setter method, don't scare. That is also possible. You can put it on top of set constructor. You want to put it, you can put it. But my question, why you need to do that? In case if you have any special purpose, you can use that. Okay. Otherwise, use auto wired with the reference only. Is that clarified, Asmita? Cool. So now the conclusion is Spring avoided configuring bean tags. So far, what we achieved is from basic bean creation to manual dependency injection to we came till here that we are creating objects automatically. We are doing auto wiring also automatically. And here in this context, we need to talk more about configuration only. Okay. This is for creating objects of other framework classes or whichever classes are not having the stereotype annotations. Okay, with the @ bean concept that we will do it in our next session.